Last 10 years.
Let me start off with a Twitch feed this morning, and I got to get the whole name right. Mile High Hockey Lab.
The city of Denver, the state of Colorado, you guys have been fucking amazing for the last 10 years.
Let me start off with a Twitch feed this morning, and I got to get the whole name right. Mile High Hockey Lab.
Welcome to
Mile High Hockey Lab.
Mile High Hockey Lab.
Hello and welcome to the Mile High Hockey Lab. My name is Adrian Hernandez. I am here so far with Jackie K and Ezra Parter. I'm just now getting a message from Mr. Managing Editor Evan that says internet is being funky. I'm trying to get in. So we're going to work our Managing Editor Evan into the conversation as soon as possible. But once again, I'm Adrian Hernandez here on behalf of MileHighHockey.com to talk all things Colorado Avalanche, as we say. Thank you, Jackie and Ezra, for joining me. If you folks haven't already, please head over to the website. Check out Jackie and Ezra's work. They are very good at what they do, and they're very passionate about this Colorado Avalanche team. So if you're looking for even more Avalanche coverage and insight, please head on over to our website and follow us on Twitter or X, to which you refer to it. Anyways, let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. It's been just over a week since we last spoke. We're going to rehash our roundtable, which was an article we did on the website, sort of just kind of a 10-game review. We're going to preview the Avs and Devils, which is a matchup coming up later this evening. And we're going to talk a little bit about the recent call-ups, some of the alum things we've seen, and maybe some more of the open conversation stuff. So we'll get there when we get there. But let's start. Well, now we have Evan and we've lost Jackie. So maybe there's just something going on in the internet world today.
The internet's doing something.
Yeah. Let's start with our roundtable talk, which Jackie is kind of the person who's on the forefront of getting us to do these roundtables, which I love because I think she knows how to ask the right questions. Honestly, I wish sometimes we had Jackie in the room because, I think that she would ask some questions of the players on the Avalanche team that maybe they're not quite used to getting. But let's get into our early impressions roundtable. And Evan, I'll start with you, and I'll start with the first question. Which of the new players has given you the best early impression? And tell me a little bit more than you did in the article.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I believe I said Miles Wood was the one that had stood out to me the most so far early on in the season. And to be quite honest, it's really only him because out of the new players, there haven't been many standouts, and I think that's kind of a sad thing to say through these opening 10 games. But when you look at, the expectations and the things that we wanted guys like Jonathan Drouin and Tomas Tatar to bring in, Ryan Johansson, they haven't hit those levels yet. Versus Miles Wood, I think, has had a little bit less pressure on him when it comes to producing, being that, I guess, quote unquote, star caliber player, right? That was never going to be his role. And so while he only has a couple of points, and I believe his only goal, or one of his few goals that he has so far this season, was that empty netter against LA to open the season. And that, no discredit to that goal, because that entire third line worked to get the puck, forecheck it up the ice, and then get the empty netter, right? That there's no disapproving of that. And I think that was part of the reason why I'd chosen him, was because that third line had actually looked pretty good until they broke it up, this last week. So I think that was mostly just part of the majority of my reasoning as to why I chose Miles Wood when it came to that question.
That makes sense. And I'm with you there. It's kind of hard to it's kind of slim pickings, as they say, in terms of which is funny because the Avs are 7-3. It's just how they've lost those 3 games has really left a stain, I think, on any positive impression you might
Really?
have, especially on the new guys. But Jackie, I found it interesting that you mentioned Riley Tufte in your answer, and I thought he looked excellent with the Avs, but it was for just a game. Tell me a little bit more on why that was your answer.
Kind of the same thing, that none of the NHL regulars have really left a big impression. And I don't think we're being too hard on them because they haven't done anything at 5-on-5. And so
That's true.
Like Evan mentioned, Wood's only goal was empty net goal. There's only outside again, McKinnon and Mikko, only 2 people have scored more than 1 even strength goal, and that's Byram and Lehkonen. So we need more from those new guys. But to answer your question about Tufte, if you're thinking about anybody that's made an impression, it's him, right?
Agreed.
Like, he's scored 9 goals in 8 games for the Eagles, including a hat trick. And he's just the one that has the most buzz about him. And ordinarily, I wouldn't pick somebody on the Eagles because obviously 9 goals in the AHL is not the same as 9 goals in the NHL.
Right.
Tufte definitely needs to do something in the NHL sooner than later. But if you're talking about somebody that's left an impression and has done more than expected, I think he's definitely put himself in the conversation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think it just goes to show that we're still talking about him, even though he only played 1 game. Just how what kind of impression that 1 game did leave. Obviously, it was a great night. I was actually in the building. It was a good night for the Avalanche. Anytime you can beat the St. Louis Blues at home with your backup netminder in net for the first time, it's a good night. But it's crazy that you mentioned that, Jackie. How little success the Avs have had 5-on-5, especially from the for sure NHL players that are kind of new to the squad. Ezra, who's stood out to you so far this season, or I guess made an impression as it's put?
Yeah, well, I was on vacation when the roundtable was being put together, so I just threw my thoughts in the comments. But I agreed with Evan. I mentioned Miles Wood, and I really liked the way that Miles Wood and Logan O'Connor seem to be pairing up in the last couple games. That Wood, Colton, O'Connor line looked pretty good. I'm wondering if maybe Colton needs a shot on the wing next to Johansson and Nichushkin to see if we can get Nichushkin and Johansson going. So maybe Wood and O'Connor stick together and we see a different center there. I don't know. Olofsson obviously being hurt throws a wrench in that because he would be the prime candidate to take that job for a couple games or something if they wanted to try something like that. But I want to take the time to shout out Ivan Prosvetov too, because
Heck yeah.
the guy. Look, he may have looked a little shaky in doing it, but he won 4-1 in his only start, and he's been a very good backup. He sits on the bench very nicely, so I think he deserves a little shout out as well.
Well, I'm totally with you there, especially like I said, I was in the building that night, and it was shaky in the sense that the Blues had some opportunities, and the Avs were fortunate. A lot of them hit the post and stuff like that, or just kind of the way the puck was bouncing, it never really allowed the Blues to get a good shot on. And I think that was kind of the focus of the game defensively for the Avalanche, was limiting the Blues opportunities, obviously with Prosvetov in the net. But the thing I really took away from his performance was he was really good at not giving up rebounds. And I think that as a backup and on a team like the Colorado Avalanche, that's pretty much what you need, is a guy who's going to stop the ones that are pretty much run-of-the-mill shots that you should stop as an NHL goaltender, maybe steal a few, but not give up a bunch of rebounds and opportunities to other teams. So I agree with you. Big shout-out to Prosvetov. I had a great time just jokingly comparing him to Binnington all night in the crowd. So I just was yelling, "Here we go! It's our turn. We're gonna keep Prosvetov in and go on a run," just to be that guy. But nonetheless, let's move on to the second question, which Jackie, I mentioned while we were trying to figure out your technical difficulties, that you kind of spearhead our roundtables. So I want to give this one to you first. What's the most surprising part of the Colorado season and play thus far? You mentioned health, so let's elaborate.
Yeah.
I don't think there's much to elaborating that.
Yeah, that exactly. I mean, other than, I guess we're assuming Olofsson tonight, there hasn't been a injury scratch, and I don't count Cogliano not playing game one. That's not an injury thing. I mean, it's a recovery thing, but whatever. So for them to pretty much have everybody available for 10 games is like a miracle for this team, right? And so, knock on wood, I think we know that, it's unusual to have no injuries, so it was nice for them to have that stretch where at least, maybe they're not, like, it's going to happen, and this team has been one of the most injured teams in the last 20 years. It's just the way it's been. Sure. But maybe it will help them in the long run, starting from a better place of health this season.
Yeah, and, I was listening to Altitude Radio today, to your point, and Mark Mosher seems very optimistic about the Landeskog situation. I don't know what kind of insight he has into that, but it sounds to me like at the very least he's kind of checking boxes on his way through this road to recovery, which is a very positive sign. He even mentioned him being told that he's going to skate pretty soon, which would be really, really good for the Avalanche. And I'm sure it'll look a lot like those skates we saw towards the end of last season, where he's taking those really elongated, exaggerated strides and those types of skates to where he's not really flying around. So there's still definitely time for Landeskog till he returns. But to your point, like, so far, knock on wood, this has been a season where the Avalanche definitely haven't dealt. I mean, we're only 10 games in, so we might just absolutely be cursing them right now. But so far, so good.
But they were already injured 10 games in. So, and just real quick on the Landy thing, I have read that, like, he's very happy with where things are at, but until he really starts to skate, like, nobody knows. I don't even think it's anything that Chris McFarland is aware of. It's just they're not going to know until he tries to really train and skate like a hockey player. So we'll see.
Exactly. Yeah, because that's much more high stress on the body and on the mind, I suppose. So coming back from an injury is both physically and mentally taxing. So definitely we'll wait and see. Eben, what's been the biggest surprise to you for the Avalanche so far this season?
It's funny you say that, because I'm trying to think back to mine and I don't even remember it. If I'm being honest, that's why I'm going to look at it right now.
Actually, it was, you mentioned that the 5-on-5 5-on-5 lack of success 5-on-5
is it lack of success 5-on-5? Okay,
let me quote you real quick, because it's actually pretty funny. You said Luke said some of the 5-on-play has been atrocious. Ryan Johansson hasn't recorded a point at even strength, and Jonathan Drouin has been dreadful. Wah, wah, wah. That's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah, it probably is. When you think about, especially those two players in particular, that they were supposed to come in. Ryan Johansson's supposed to fill this 2C slot.
More him than Drouin, but yes.
More him than Drouin for sure. But I think a lot of people were chomping at the bit for the reconnection of Drouin and McKinnon and getting that. Yeah, exactly. Getting that rolling again. I'm not calling you out, I promise. But because I was the same way too. I was the same way too. I was thinking that Drouin would at least have more than 1 point 10 games into the season with this Avalanche team, right?
Agreed.
I think we all kind of can say that, right? So sure, maybe the power play did really well to start the season, the penalty kill as well, but even those have fallen off. And I know that's part of the next question that we'll go over, at least for me personally. But you would just want your players to play really well during the game when it's majority 5-on-5. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's how that hasn't been, I guess, really fulfilled, and how that hasn't been something that the Avs haven't been able to succeed with is kind of a little staggering, I think, despite the record.
Well, and Ezra, tell me, what are your thoughts on the 5-on-5 struggles? I think I was going to touch on this later on, but we might as well just get into it now, since it's kind of the topic as is. Is there something in particular that you can kind of attribute that struggle to, or is this kind of just weird?
I mean, I think it is kind of weird. I mean, I'll start with the third line, which is, Colton and Wood and someone. And they've been in the other team's zone almost all the time, at least lately. Early on in the season, they were struggling. And having O'Connor on that wing has really helped. I I love that line, the three of them together.
Yeah.
I'm really happy with it. I covered it extensively in my weekly grades last week. But I think that line is creating a ton of possession and not necessarily creating a ton of chances.
Gotcha.
And that comes with the way that those guys play, especially O'Connor and Wood. They play on the boards, right? So they're not guys that generate a ton of chances, but they're guys that generate a ton of possession, and then they rely on getting it back to the defense to put shots on net or getting it to a center in a position to shoot. And Colton's been doing a better job of that the last couple of games. But early on in the season, I felt like he was playing a little bit tentative, kind of getting his feet wet in the system, trying to figure out how he fits into the team, right? And that's normal for a new player. So I don't have a problem with that. I do think that there's offense to come from that third line. And we saw it with Drouin on the wing instead of O'Connor. There was a game where they actually created a goal that got called back, right?
Right.
Beautiful finish from Miles Wood on a nifty pass from Drouin from the point to the slot. It was beautiful, but it got called back because it was slightly offside. So they didn't really cheat to create the goal, but they were offside. So I think that line has promise. The second line is where it's a little more concerning for me with Ryan Johansson. I mean, again, the underlying stats for this line aren't terrible. Johansson and Nichushkin as a combo has been okay. When Nichushkin's not going, though, it is bad. And we've only seen Nichushkin truly bad in that Vegas game. But he's had other games where he's been kind of, I don't know, just looking a little bit
sluggish.
Slow, maybe looking a little bit like he's feeling like he has to lead that line in a way that he's never had to do before. And he's not – it's not that he's not up to the task, because he definitely is, but maybe he's just not sure how he fits with Ryan Johansson. And they have to work on that chemistry. And then figuring out who their third winger is a huge part of that too, because the chemistry of the line is completely different when it's Jonathan Drouin, who kind of hangs back and waits for the puck to come to him and make plays with it, or Thomas Tatar, who you kind of never know what you're going to get from, or if it's Arturi Lehkonen, who's just going hard and digging all the time. So it's a different mix, and it's hard for them to gel. I think they will. I think ultimately what has to happen is Nichushkin has to assert himself and be like, I'm going to be the guy who drives play for this line. Ryan Johansson, I will pass the puck to you. You figure out where you're going to be, and we'll do it that way, instead of kind of – it looks to me like Nichushkin's been seeing what Johansson's going to do rather than doing what Nichushkin does. And I think
I agree.
That line.
Yeah. And it's funny, it's like I think when you've seen him not on that line, specifically when they've moved him further down the line, you've seen him kind of like snap into that version of him where it's just like, well, I'm just going to use my body and my frame and drive it to the net and see what happens. And I think that if he employs that kind of strategy that you're talking about and kind of is kind of the more assertive one on that second line, I think you're right. I think that bodes well for the Avalanche. And I think it'll be better for Nichushkin's confidence, which I'm with you. I feel almost like he's kind of gripping the stick a little bit too. Like in the moments where he's not waiting for a setup, he's really pressing. And I think that that's like mental torture for a player. So hopefully he kind of calms down, settles in, lets the game sort of come to him. We have a comment here from Sage Walker. Sage, you are a frequent flyer of the Mile High Hockey Lab, so thank you for joining and for commenting as always. Says, do you think Drouin's lack of points falls on him, or could that be falling on our other top liners back as well? How much is Drouin's lack of success? How much does that have to do with McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen, Jackie?
I would say not so much. It's funny, on the Nichushkin conversation, he's the one I'd like to see on that line with McKinnon and Rantanen.
Right.
I just think, like, Drouin's not a top line player, and so, like, if Halifax wasn't a thing, they would have never put him there. Like, you don't sign a guy for $800,000 and put him on your top line.
Correct.
So I just think he was miscast there, and I think I even explained it last week. If I didn't, it's Bednar wants a forechecker with McKinnon and Rantanen. That's not Drouin. It's just stylistically, it's not going to work. And there wasn't like this amazing, mind-blowing reuniting of chemistry that resulted in goals. And it's just like, and I know a lot of people were thinking like, well, they didn't stick with it that long. Like, it was going to eventually happen, but I don't really buy into that. So, like, okay, Drouin is a playmaker, and yes, for him to get points, he needs a finisher. And so I'm not going to say that like he's the one that's terrible and it's nobody else's problem. But he needs to put in the correct role, and he needs to find a good line. And like he has his own finishing problems, which I think is just him. Like I don't expect him to score maybe more than 10 goals. So it's kind of yes and no. I mean, everything is always a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but
Yeah.
like I said, that's not his role in the top line. So like expecting that to go any different, I think is wrong. And so they do really need to find a fit with him. Like I said before, I liked him on that third line. Like it worked. Their analytics were good. It was nice to have a little bit of playmaking with more of the north-south guys like Colton and Wood. I think that line has a lot of promise. And so I'd like to see that continue. And I think because like you mentioned the called back goal, like that was a really nice play. Maybe we could see more of that. To me, that's where I think it's like that needs to continue. And they need to invest in that kind of setup.
Yeah.
Just for all of them to get more points. I think it'll benefit all of them. So that's kind of where I'm at with Drouin.
Yeah, and I mentioned it last week. Like when I think of who's played well with Mikko and Nathan, it's Landeskog, and Nichushkin and Landeskog have a lot more in common than Jonathan Drouin and Landeskog do. And I'm not saying there's only one way to skin that cat, but we know for a fact that works. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that Landeskog is willing to get in front of the net and cause havoc. Nichushkin is the same. They both love to be pesky on the forecheck. They both love to be very physical in the corners when they're playing at their best. So I think like that's gonna work still. So I hear you, Sage, and Sage added some more. He says here, short-lived line pairings on the top of the rest of the team not producing just makes it hard to put a lot on Drouin. Totally agree. He wasn't playing his role as a forechecker, but can't see all the blame. I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
for
totally.
sure. It's not just him, for sure.
Yeah,
like,
and I think
like
Jackie, you mentioned
scoring at 5-5.
yeah, well, and it's more so to your point, Jackie, not on him in that maybe he slotted into the role in the first place was kind of a mistake. I think they were just like thinking about his ceiling and said, why not find out? I think that time frame might be coming to a pretty screeching halt, though, based on the utter lack of success that we've seen with that combination. So thanks again, Sage. We appreciate your contribution and questions. Keep them coming. But let's get into the next question in our roundtable, which was around areas of improvement. Evan, your answer here. Let's see if I can pull it up for you.
I remember this one.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I remember this one. I remember writing this one. That's why I was confused with the other one. Because most everybody had already hit the points that I was going to hit by the time I wrote it at like 10 o'clock in the Phoenix airport or whatever. It was, but basically I said the power play. And that was just because when you think back, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it was like for their last like 13 or something crazy like that. Right. And that's not good. Right. I mean, I think that's really that's the best thing I can say about it. That's not good. And when you think about the other struggles that this team has 5-on-5 in particular, as we've already mentioned already, when you're on the power play, that's the time for your star players to show up and get you on the board when maybe the team behind you isn't doing so, right? Mm-hmm. That's when your stars step up. That's when your stars come into play. I mean, Johansson, he does have points. It's not like he hasn't done nothing, but they've all come on that power play, which is a good thing when it comes to that power play unit. But that was at the beginning of the season. So now how do you get that chemistry that you had at the beginning of the year, that the way that you were able to move the puck work well? How do you get that now to transition into, these games that can kind of drag maybe, or a game where you're down and you need to get back into it, right? How do you swing the momentum your way? The chance to do it is on the power play. And when you're 0 for your last however many at this point, that's not going to help you at all win any hockey games.
Well, what's funny is to your point, if you think about the other game that the Avs kind of got close to being shut out, it was against Mackenzie Blackwood and the San Jose Sharks. And if not for a late power play goal from Cale Makar to tie the game at 1, the Avs probably would have gotten shut out by the San Jose Sharks.
And the fact that that is the only Sharks point that they have this entire season so far is hilarious. Yeah. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, well, the last question on here was, and we'll move on to our next segment because this one kind of drug on a little bit without me realizing because I wasn't paying much attention to the clock. But we're talking about which upcoming game we're most looking forward to, and honestly, and I think I'm probably not alone, Ezra, in thinking that this Devils game was already one that I had circled as an exciting game for the Avalanche. Obviously, the one before that was Vegas, and that was an absolute dud. So we'll just kind of move on, throw that one away, pretend it didn't happen, and let's talk about the New Jersey Devils. Ezra, I'll send this one your way because they're kind of one of your squads, a squad that I believe you had as your pick for the Stanley Cup champions this season. Tell me a little bit about this team. They're pretty young, like you mentioned. They got lofty goals. Does this matchup make you nervous as from the Avs fan perspective?
Yeah, I mean, they're young and talented. They play really fast. They have a high-flying offense, but they also have really responsible defense in their forward group and their defense group. So they are a challenging matchup. I answered this question in our roundtable. What's the game you're most excited about? As just the next game, which happened to be this one, because I think after that Vegas game, it is the response that interests me, not so much the matchup with the Devils. But I also want to. I know we're throwing away that Vegas game, but real quick, the actual play of the Avalanche in that game was pretty good. There was some awful mistakes that led to goals and not a lot of pushback afterwards, which is frustrating. And I'm not going to say that we should play like that every game or anything, but I don't have as much a problem with the underlying play as I do with the final score. But anyway, I think they're going to bounce back because that score was so upsetting, and they're going to come out. And I said this after the Pittsburgh loss, and it didn't happen quite like this in Buffalo. But they're going to come out and they're going to make a statement that says, "Hey, that's not who we are. Who we are is a good team." And New Jersey's without Jack Hughes, so this is a good opportunity to say that with a big goal differential, because New Jersey's going to have a much harder time putting up points than they would with the NHL's leading scorer at the time of his injury.
Well, yeah, and just to touch on the Vegas thing, you're right, especially pretty much up in the whole first period, the Avs were playing really well, and we kind of had an unfortunate play with Cale Makar kind of catching an edge, and things changed and just went downhill from there.
Yeah, I mean, that was also a lot of bad play from McKinnon on that play. Yeah, there's a lot going wrong there. There are boneheaded plays that you can point to on every goal. But your point is valid, that they were playing pretty well. Other than the plays. Well,
and even Cale Makar, I think he answered the question, and I couldn't tell if he was just being intentionally ironic to kind of poke fun at the reporter, but he was like, "Well, we're giving up too many high danger chances, and we're not creating enough for ourselves." And it really is that simple. And I don't think he meant to sound facetious, because I think it is just that simple. Like you said, they're making very costly turnovers, which are creating high danger chances for their opposition. And when you're doing that, you're probably not creating very many high danger chances for yourself. So,
right. But if you look at Natural Stat Trick, the actual high danger chance charting on there, the Avs are doing a good job. They're just theirs are not going in the net, and the other teams are
shooting,
right now.
Shooting percentage. Well, we talked about that last week. We feel like the Avs shooting percentage should level out in a positive way, because it feels like they're shooting well below what they should. On an average basis. Evan, what are your thoughts on the matchup tonight against the New Jersey Devils? And touch a little bit on that Vegas game for a second. I mentioned in the script the Avalanche have been shut out in all three of their losses. Is there something particular to that, or what's kind of going on there?
Yeah, I will call myself lucky that I missed out on that Vegas game on Saturday. I haven't even tuned into the highlights. I don't think I will. I think kind of left in the past, honestly.
Good for you.
So yay with me being busy with other things. But anyway,
thank God for NASCAR.
Thank God for NASCAR, exactly. But touching on this Devils game, if you would have asked me 2 weeks ago how, I guess, interested / scared I would have been about this game, it definitely would have been more heightened than I am now. Mm-hmm. And that is because of the aforementioned Jack Hughes injury. But also Nico Hischier is going to be out, their captain. He's also out with injury. And that's a big blow for this team that has a lot of young guys and doesn't have, I guess, a true leader, I guess. I would say that Timo Meier probably fits into that category, but this is also just his first full year now as a Devil.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to see kind of what he does and tries to lead the Devils. This is the last of a 4-game road trip for them out west. So they'll obviously be looking forward to getting home. Are they going to come home? Are they going to go home, happy, or is it going to be, tails between their legs? And that all depends, of course, on how the Avs respond from that Saturday night game in Vegas. From the sounds of it, as heard here and on social media, that the Avs didn't play bad, but that a lot of things just didn't go their way, which ultimately made the game bad. So if they can shift the momentum early, and I think I said it in our Puck Yeti preview, or it was somewhere else, I don't remember, was that if the Avs if they jump ahead early or they fall behind early, that's going to set the tone for a lot of what we see tonight. And so we'll have to see kind of how that goes. The Avs are undefeated at home, but this is only their 4th home game of the season. And if they can get ahead early and get the crowd behind them, awesome, great. National TV game that's only going to help them even more. So fingers crossed that they will be able to bounce back in a good way tonight against what should be different and maybe struggling Devils team.
Well, it's interesting because I now that I'm sitting here listening to you talk about it, I'm like, wow, if you really frame it in a positive way, the Avs are undefeated when they score.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
So, I mean, just score. And that was my next question on the script is scoring first seems to be another indicator of the outcome for the Avalanche. Well, even more so, scoring at all seems to be the ultimate indicator for the Avalanche. Jackie, what's your thoughts on that? Is that just kind of like totally weird and not something we see as like a common theme, or like are we in trouble?
Well, scoring first is always important, and I think it's kind of a mentality thing. Like, scoring gives them a lot of confidence. I mean, that's like a pretty obvious thing, but that's just the way that this team is going. It's kind of like a couple things don't go their way, and they seem to sort of, I'm not going to say quit or give up, but just definitely the effort level, the commitment to checking, the commitment to playing hard, doing all the hard things seem to start to go away. And I believe some of the players have even sort of acknowledged this as they sort of understand it. So if they can score first, that's great. Then they're going to be building that momentum. They're going to be riding that probably to another score. And it, like, kind of going back to the Vegas game, it is true, like, that first period wasn't bad play, but the game itself was terrible. There were so many whistles. This game had almost 80 face-offs. It was terrible. It was just choppy, just stops and starts. That first period lasted almost an hour. It was so bad. And so it's just, but yeah, they were still in it. And so I think that was a big part of it. And then just the big mistakes. Like, I think that first one with the weird Makar thing, the first power play unit had been out for almost the whole time. They were exhausted. Like, they have to stop doing that.
Yeah.
Going back
that
to
whole
the full
2-minute power play thing. Yeah.
Yeah, power play real quick. Sometimes to get the power play out of a rut is to have the second unit score. It's kind of counterintuitive, and they seemed like, okay, we're just going to leave the Stars out for 2 minutes. I think that's working against them. They're getting tired. They're giving up the shorthanded. And it just seems to give everybody a boost if you can get that second unit to put one in. But so all of this gets into, if they find a way to score first, they'll probably be okay. And I think there is truth to that.
Just going back to the Vegas, I didn't know it was 80 faceoffs in 60 minutes.
Yeah,
I just did the math. That is 1.33 faceoffs per minute.
Yes,
like,
it was
that's
terrible.
Wild.
It was like unwatchable even when the score was close.
Yeah,
that means every third minute you had 2 face-offs inside of it.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Well, I know I'm going to get crap for saying this, but thank God I was watching cars turn left rather than watching a whole bunch of face-offs.
You know what? Good for you for poking fun at yourself.
The Avs and all that. Like,
yeah. Maybe I felt like the Avs were like Zoolander and they couldn't turn left. So when they were playing the Golden Knights, so it's pretty cool that you weren't witnessing that monstrosity. Neither was I. Thankfully, I was doing a diaper derby for the baby to be, and I
Side
did
note,
have.
congratulations.
Thank
by
you
the
very
way.
much. I had
Congratulations.
some Confederates on the Avs, one particular Avs scoring, Val Nichushkin, who regrettably had probably the worst game of all the skaters.
Yeah.
So I guess I won't be putting any quiche on the line anymore because apparently it's all me, or at least I like to tell myself that. But I like always to ask you, the three of you, like what matchups you're keying on ahead of a game like tonight. But as obviously we've touched on the fact that really of the big guns for the Devils, only Timo Meyer and some of the guys on the back end are really sticking out. We've talked about the Avalanche getting off to an early start and how important that is. But is there anything else we haven't really touched on that we should be keen on heading into the Devils matchup? Jackie, I'll send this one to you.
Sure. Yeah, I think the Devils. The reason why they're so good, and they have been for the last couple years or so, is they have a good team. So it's not just Jack Hughes. I'd like to shout out Dawson Mercer. I don't think he gets much headline love, but he's a super solid, good young player for them. So he's somebody that I is looking forward to watching. They're definitely going to have to neutralize him. Also, Luke Hughes, he's their rookie. I'm interested to see what the hype's about with him. I have not watched him play yet. So those are probably two of the names that stick out in my mind, other than the obvious. So
nice. And is Luke Hughes the brother of Jack?
Yes, he is.
Jack
He
and
is.
Quinn.
So there you go. So that is something cool to watch. It's unfortunate that Jack is not playing tonight because that would have been a cool thing for Colorado Avalanche fans that are attending the game tonight. But that's awesome. I like Dawson Mercer as well. And there's a couple of guys on the Devils. Like you mentioned, they're just a good team. And I think that their management has done a good job to construct them. That's why, a lot of people have been excited about them coming into this season, including Ezra. We touched on them being kind of offensive oriented, but being decent on the back end. Is there a pretty strong balance to that, Evan? Or do you think that maybe one is stronger than the other?
I do think that part of making up a good team is just having that balance, right? That's what won the Avs the cup, a couple of years ago, was having a really good balance up and down the lineup. So I really just think it's that. And I also kind of think that, kind of touching back on the last question, is part of that balance is also good goaltending. And I think that that's a matchup I'll be looking forward to watching tonight is presumably it sounds like Alexander Georgiev versus Vitek Vanacek. And Vanacek has started the season really, really well for the Devils. Nice. I know the last time they played, two games ago when they played the Blues, Vanacek was not playing and they lost. So, that's just part of it, right? And I think back to, I believe it was Sunday against Chicago where he had a diving save and ridiculous stop, right? So that will be another interesting matchup because how will Georgiev respond after Saturday night? It sounds like he wasn't pulled. Is that correct? No, he wasn't pulled. Yeah. So, being pummeled with 7 goals all game. And then on top of that, Vanacek coming in, who's had a very solid year. Georgiev, who's usually been solid, but has been used a lot to start the year. How are those two going to match up, right? They may also be a key part in how this game ends when the final horn blows tonight.
Yeah, Ezra, tell me what you think of Georgiev's performance so far, and I'll just touch back on Vitek Vanacek. You mentioned he's had a good start. He's 6-2 so far, and he's posting a 3.05 GAA and a 900 save percentage. So I think he probably wants to get those last two numbers into a better place. But wins and losses wise, you're right. He's and that kind of just goes to show he's made the saves that are necessary. We talked about Georgiev being in the whole time for that 7-goal route from the Golden Knights. Ezra, what is your kind of outlook on the Georgiev situation right now? Are you optimistic or are you kind of worried?
I'm optimistic. I think there's reason for worry for sure. He started the season super strong and then clearly, tailed off in the losses, the last chunk here. But I think a lot of the problem is the play in front of him. He's getting hung out to dry, and he hasn't been able to come up with the miracle saves that he was in the first chunk. But that is how the season goes. You don't get those every night. You get those sometimes, unless you're No, even if you are Andrew, like a Vasilevsky or a Hellebuck, you're not able to get those every night. The pucks go in sometimes. That being said, those 7 goals, they weren't. Some of them were stoppable. None of them were like gross. None of them you watch it and you're like, what is this guy doing? But I would say all of them, you're like, he could have had that. You know? Not he should have. Not you expect him to, but he could have. Yeah. And I think those are the plays that aren't happening for him right now. The he could have had that's are going in. But none of the should haves are going in, which is good. So I'm optimistic. I think he will bounce back. I think he's shown how good he can be, and he's showing us, that he's not that guy every night, which is okay. It just means that there's going to need to be some more starts from Prosvetov as the season goes on, or maybe Annunen, or maybe. If Francouz isn't going to come back and they're not happy with Prosvetov and Annunen, they'll need to bring in some support for Georgiev, because he's not a guy who you want to have starting 60 games a season, and there are very few of those. So that's not really a knock on him. It's just a reality.
Look who got waived today.
I know. I saw
that. I'm not even going to fuel those fires.
I don't know. It'd be kind of fun to yell "soup" and Ballerina. It's a can company, and that's a marriage waiting to happen. But no, I'm with you there. What's funny, if you think about Georgiev, it's kind of been the tale of two halves of his season to start, because he was 5-0 and then had like gaudy numbers in a positive way. And since then, he's kind of tethered off. He's 2-3. I'm sorry, 1-3. And now his numbers, he's looking more like 3 goals against and below 900 save percentage, which I'm be willing to wager it's somewhere in between, kind of like what last year looked like with the 2.53 and the 919 save percentage. And coincidentally, he did play those 62 games last season, but I'm with you there, Ezra. Like, I don't think in the long term and what's best for the Avalanche is to see that be repeated on a year-to-year basis. That just means you don't have a serviceable backup, or at least one that you're confident in. And that's not really the recipe for success in today's NHL. Jackie, what are your thoughts on the goalie situation for the Avalanche currently?
Well, the overall situation, I guess I was a touch disappointed that Annunen didn't get that start. Like, I think it's set up well for him, especially with the success that he had against the Blues. But, obviously Prosvetov did his job and got the win and everything. So, you're not going to take that back. But they really need to figure out if they believe in Annunen or not. Mm-hmm. Like, I think the question seems to surround on Prosvetov. Like, is he somebody that they're gonna make the backup next year or whatever? And it's possible he could, but I think they're trying to avoid answering the question with Annunen, and they absolutely have to answer it this year. So it's like, it doesn't have to happen tomorrow, but like, we're getting there, and they're gonna either have to do something with him or move on. And so I was a little disappointed they didn't give him the chance, and I'm sure there'll be other opportunities, but it also doesn't last forever. So the same thing with Georgiev. We know that he's strong. We know that the Avs like to lean on a goaltender. I wouldn't be surprised if he got 50 plus starts if he's healthy, knock on wood. And I think that's okay. That's just kind of the way that this team's set up as. But I guess it is a little scary if he gets injured. For sure, then you're really just like, oh my God, what does the goaltending look like?
Then we find out about Annunen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask. I was going to ask if, heaven forbid, Alexander Georgiev is out. Do you go with Prosvetov to start, or do you go with Annunen to start? Because you have.
Well, it's not going to be Annunen. They don't trust him to start one game. They're not going to trust him to be the starter.
Well, I guess
the two of those guys duking it out in practice for the role. Yeah. They don't have another option.
But I'll tell you what, color me terrified.
Yeah.
You know what? Honestly, though, I kind of, yes, it is obviously worse than Georgiev, but I'm like, hey, let's find out. If that has to happen, let's find out. Let's find out what Annunen's got. Let's find out what Prosvetov's got.
Well, then
you got his prospects.
Then you got Ado writing articles about Annunen like he wrote about Drouin, and that's just not good for anybody if that happens. So
in theory, it makes sense that, like, okay, now you have these two guys who are in theory ready, but I just don't see the Avs doing that. They'll panic. And if we're talking about, okay, he's out a week, they can manage that. But if it's like, 6 to 8 weeks or something, they'll
They
panic.
go get someone. Yeah.
Yeah, because they just don't trust these guys. Like
Well-
they can say that they do, but they don't.
Well,
So
yeah. The
for
proof
now,
is in
it's
the one
fine.
start for either of them between
Yeah.
the three of them. You know what I mean? So it's like
basically,
you can't really argue against what we've seen show up on the
True.
ice on a night in and night in basis. But let's talk a little bit about those call-ups that we're kind of touching on right now. And if you folks haven't already, please head on over to X and follow us at Mile High Hockey. You can also follow this podcast specifically at capital MHH _ capital Lab. But over there, that's kind of we talk a little bit, about everything, kind of the news that hits the wire. And I think it was you, Evan, that tweeted out when we saw that Andrej Pavel is getting called up. You said something to the effect of, "Well, Tufty's sitting right in front of you." What? Elaborate on that for me.
Yeah, I kind of got a little backlash from that. I was mostly
Alright.
just saying that of like the fact that you have a guy who has averaged more than a point a game in the AHL, but you're calling up a guy who's never seen an NHL game and has no points in Loveland. And
Yeah.
I kind of realize now that it is for a role. It's the role that
Fourth
Pavel
line.
will play. Exactly.
Right.
It'll be the role that Andre Pavel will play, and not Riley Tufte.
Well,
but to
that's
that,
okay. Just talk about why you like Riley Tufte, because I
Yeah,
don't think there's anything wrong with that take.
I was going to say, but to kind of back that up, then is I would I guess kind of counteract that with, well, why don't you call up Riley Tufte anyway, and then you just push somebody down
Yeah.
from where Tufte would play, right?
There's
Whether
still a
it's
solution where
second line,
Riley
third line.
Tufte's on the app.
exactly right. And so we saw how well he did in the one game that he had so far this season. Now, granted, it was only one game, and it was against the St. Louis Blues. Now, I don't know how much of an impact, if any, he would have made in Vegas on Saturday. But I would, if you're looking for an answer or something different with this team that is struggling on the road in particular, Tufte could have that answer, right? It's a different face. It's a different mindset, a different way that maybe you can get pucks to the net. And Tufte can bring that,
Yeah.
So I just think I would like to see him utilized more. And considering how his preseason was, how his AHL season has gone so far, at least compared to some of the other options that they have called up, I feel like I would have Tufte towards the top of that list.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion.
Well, I'd agree with you, and as you mentioned, I mean, he has a point in every game in the AHL, basically, or literally. And I mean, on a team that's getting shut out every time they lose, maybe that kind of touch is something that you can at least see if it's there at the top level. One game I don't think is a big enough sample size to really know if he has the capability of putting up points in the NHL. But Ezra, what are your thoughts on Tufte's performance, and touch a little bit on Pavel and kind of what he'll bring to the table tonight if he is in that fourth center role?
Yeah, I liked Tufte's game against St. Louis. I thought he created some chances. He was, in on the offense. He was very protected in where he was played, right? So he didn't get tested too much defensively, and that's a trust thing with the coaching staff that he'll have to earn if he gets more shots in the NHL, and he will get more shots in the NHL. It's just inevitable that injuries will crop up. I liked Andre Pavel a lot in the preseason. From what we saw of him, we didn't see a ton of him because he was injured for a lot of it. But what we saw, I liked, and we saw from Bednar's comments about him that he liked him too. What he brings is that fourth line grinder, penalty killer kind of role that is exactly what we've lost with the injury to Fredrik Olofsson. So it makes sense for him to be the call up in that sense, right? Like Evan mentioned, it makes sense for him to be the call up there if they're looking for that role to be filled. There aren't a whole lot of guys that do exactly that. We could bump people down, like Evan said, but then, I mean, who really do you have that's a fourth line center? Even if you're bumping down guys like Tatar and Jonathan Drouin, you don't have that guy. You could put Cogliano at center on the fourth line. That my preference would have been, let's get Tufte back up here because the second line hasn't been figured out. So maybe he is a solution there, and give him an opportunity again to prove that. But that does leave the fourth line in a tough spot. Oh, that's interesting. Sage Walker says Tufte was at Adam Johnson's memorial. That could be another reason.
That's right.
At all.
I mean, that's true, but they could have
that's-
called him up
that-
today. So I don't
Sure,
think
but
that's
maybe
like
he's, he
Yeah,
asked
personal
for some
reasons,
time
like,
to
yeah,
give him
maybe
some-
not today. Yeah, that's a good
I
point.
don't
But
know his relationship with Adam Johnson, but it sounds like it's closer than I realized. So
They played together
so that's really
at
interesting. Thank you, Sage.
wherever.
yeah,
but I bet
that's
he plays for the Eagles tonight. So I don't know.
interesting.
To me,
That'll be
that's
something to
not
keep an eye on.
enough of a
Mhm.
reason.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I just think your fourth line then becomes some combination of Cogliano centering McDermott and Tatar.
no, they don't need
and
McDermott in. They don't. They're
No,
not
they
missing
don't. I don't
enough.
want that. I'm not saying that
Guys,
that's what it should be. But like,
so-
it's some weird combination of players that doesn't make sense. So with Pavel there, at least you're like, okay, this is a fourth line guy. Cogliano is a fourth line guy, and whoever
Boom.
we put next to them will play.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So
I think it's a little bit easier to predict. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with you there. And I don't know. I couldn't help myself, but as soon as I saw Curtis McDermott was in the lineup against the Blues, I hammered him to score anytime because I was like, we beat him up all the time, and every single time we do, he does something, and he damn near
He'll
scored
score on
too.
his birthday. Bet for him to score on his birthday.
Yeah. So he didn't come through for me. So I'll
Honestly,
still say he really was. He really was. And it's funny. I'd have to admit that it kind of does look like he's worked specifically on his offensive game, which is hilarious to me. Good for him, I suppose, if that's what's been asked of him. He's done his job. But nonetheless, let's go back and give kudos to Prosvetov, but also, Evan, I want you to talk a little bit about Caleb Jones because he was called up. If I'm not mistaken, he didn't get a game yet, though. So what are your thoughts on that situation?
Yeah, Caleb Jones. He was called up in case either Makar or Byram weren't able to go,
and they both went.
and against the Blues, and they both went right. So barring that's not the right word. That it is better to play Makar and Byram than it is Caleb Jones, right? That I think that's just kind of the nature of the game, all that sort of thing. With that being said, though, I would be interested to see how Caleb Jones would do, perhaps with a guy like Josh Manson, because Jack. If you ask me about the defense, I think most people would say that they're a little shaky on Jack Johnson and the Josh Manson pairing.
Yeah.
And so maybe trying like a different combination with that third pairing would be unique to kind of see. But at the same time, if they don't need him, they don't need him. And I think that's a good thing, honestly, because then he can get more playing time up in Loveland with the Eagles, and he can build his game up a little bit better up there. And then that will then only help him when the time does come for him to be called up. And it's not like he's going down to the Eagles with a bunch of other rookies that are going to be, going for that same spot, right? We have Brad Hunt, who's a huge veteran, a huge presence in that Eagles locker room.
Captain.
I can almost guarantee you that Caleb Jones is talking to Brad Hunt on a daily basis, trying to figure out how to get better on defense. And so I think those are just kind of my thoughts on Caleb Jones, is that if you don't need him, great, get him some more playing time, get him some more development, which will then only help him, when he does get called up again, which I'm sure he will get at least a game under.
I was going to say, I wouldn't be surprised if it's more than that. I think that really they're winding him up into being kind of not necessarily a mainstay, but I do think that someone's going to be in an ideal situation, someone that you can swap in and out for Jack for kind of like a maintenance night, or Josh, really. Kind of the more lumbering defenders we have, and Jack with the more older defender. It is kind of nice to every once in a while give them a night off, especially in a week where, there's 2 or 3 days between a game. You give them that game off and they basically get off an entire week. And you have Caleb Jones come up for a game or 2 at most. But yeah, I'm with you. I think that they do give him his shot, and I'm honestly excited to see. It's always nice when you kind of acquire someone you didn't expect to acquire, and you get to see kind of where they sit in terms of their development and where they might fit into the future for the Colorado Avalanche. But when we talk about the future, we got to talk about bold predictions. So let's just get into the fun stuff, and let's have our bold prediction session. And I wrote everyone's down, and I'm pretty sure I even wrote mine down this week. But while I pull those up, let's do that fun thing we do and roll the music, baby. Roll that bold prediction tune.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
I call that bold talk.
Oh, yeah, we did it. Let's get into it right now. Evan, we'll start with you. Your bold prediction this past week, was that the fourth line would register 3 points. I do not believe that.
Well, when you get shut out by Vegas, I feel like that's just an automatic.
Yeah, I'd be willing to agree with you that when you get shut out,
That's
it's
right.
not likely that the fourth line.
And he switched up the fourth line anyway, so that it was just kind of ruined from the beginning, honestly.
Yeah. Well, my bold prediction was that the Avalanche would go to overtime in both games, and that was wrong in both scenarios, unless you go to overtime for being shut out, which I'm pretty sure you don't. So that did not work out for the Colorado Avalanche either. So that's 0-2. But Jackie, I don't really know how to log yours, because to me, Anunin didn't get called up, so we'll put a wrong there. But you were keen on the fact that that's probably when they were going to start someone else besides Georgiev, and you wanted that person to win. So I'm going to give you a ding.
Half. I'll take a half.
Yeah,
I
we'll give
think
you a
half's
ding.
fair.
Okay, good. Yeah, and then I was hoping you were right though that Anunin would play. So I was happy that the Avs won. Happy that Prosvetov seemed serviceable, but I really wanted to see Anunin that night, specifically for this bold prediction segment, because we almost got a double ding in 1 week. But a half ding, we'll take it. Let's get into this week, though. And I don't know if you folks have thought about it. Raise your hand if you're ready. Ezra's ready. Ezra's ready to go. Hit me with it, my man.
All right. Well, look, I'm gonna keep championing my favorite new line, the Logan Coltonwood. I want that to be the name. I think we're gonna see. How bold do I want to go? I think against New Jersey, we're going to see 2 points, and then we're going to see 2 more points the rest of the week from this line. 4 points total.
4 points total, 2 points from tonight, you said?
2 points tonight. Wood puts on a show against his old boys.
I like that.
That's a good point.
To the rest of the week. I'm writing this down, and I had to get your name for them because I love that. The Logan Coltonwood line. So 2 points tonight and 2 points the rest of the week for the Logan Coltonwood line. Jackie, let's get into your bold prediction this week.
Would it be considered bold at this point to say they'll score a goal on the road?
I think so.
But I know they're not playing on the road this week, so it doesn't count.
As I said, their next road game's next week. Yeah,
that's why I was thinking it'd be so bold.
Yeah.
But no, I'll have a real one. I will predict that Tufte will play for the Avs this week.
Nice. I like that one.
We'll see. We'll see what gets him up.
I tweeted after the game was like, and I think you're right, Ezra, you mentioned that he was like in a position where he was kind of defensively insulated. But there were a couple times where I was like, poor kid is like, oh shit. He had a couple oh shit moments getting in coverage on the defensive end. And you were right. Like he was lucky, I think, in a lot of those exchanges. So I think in the real world of it all, when those start to go the way they typically do in the NHL, those mistakes, I think he'll have a little bit of a humbling. But I'm with you guys. I think Tufte's looked good so far this season, and I'd like to see him more. So Jackie, you're saying we're going to see him this week.
Yes.
And I like it.
It's crazy that with all the way that the puck bounces were going against the Avs all week, in that game they went his way.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously nothing bounced in, so not quite his way. But yeah.
All right, Evan, are you ready for your bold prediction?
I'm ready.
All right,
I'll be honest, I'm not very keen on it. But if it happens, I think a lot of Av fans would be very happy. I guess not both. Ryan Johansson will get his first 5-on-5 goal, and then Jonathan Drouin will get his first goal in this week.
Wow, but both? I'd say one or the other is bold enough, but both.
I mean, I could see Drouin assisting on a Johansson goal, but Drouin scoring a goal, this is crazy.
There's a reason why I said I'm not very keen on it, but that was the best I could come up with.
So
That's
Does
good.
Duran
That's a good
score a
prediction.
goal before Gerard? That could be a
Ooh.
good question.
Oh,
Gerard
Gerard
was
hasn't
good
scored
this year.
yet.
Man.
that's
No.
a good
I
that's a
almost
good
went with him,
poll.
too.
I'm gonna pop that out as a poll right now, real quick, Jackie, and see if we can get any voters before, because that's a
Yeah,
good
that's
one.
fine.
So I like it though, because I was beating down the door of the Drew In store before the season started. So if he scores, I think that will be on the power play on the second unit. And if
Okay, I
Johansson
could see
scores
that.
5-on-5, I wonder if it's without Valeri Nichushkin on the same line as him. So that's my cherry on top of your bold prediction this week, which is a very bold one. I got to give it to you, Evan. You got the assignment, as they say.
I know. I know.
All right, so that just leaves me, the silly boy, and I guess I didn't write it down after all. So you know what we say around here, folks. If I didn't write it down,
Adrian.
it was so wrong.
Okay, write yours down as you say it.
I'm gonna do it. Yeah, we're gonna type it into Twitter. Ado's
Oh my
prediction.
gosh, that's funny.
All right, my bold prediction this week is that the Avalanche will go undefeated this week, and one of those games will be a shutout. So it's real bold.
Ooh.
I see a turnaround coming for the Avs. I'm with Ezra. I think enough's enough. I think the Avs start making statements towards what and who they are in terms of their identities, and I think that starts this week. Turn the page kind of on the Vegas fiasco and have a good one tonight against the New Jersey Devils. So the Avs will go undefeated this week, and they will get a shutout inside of that.
I could totally see that happening.
If you had to pick, which game do you think they're going to get a shutout?
St. Louis.
Yeah,
I was gonna say my head says St. Louis, and my heart says Seattle.
I don't like playing the same teams close proximity like that. Just
interesting.
saying.
What are your thoughts on that? Why is that?
Because if you won, you're gonna lose the next one. And
Yeah.
I don't like that they're replaying both of these teams again, and then they play Seattle again next week. It's not good.
Yeah, that's
Saying they're not going to win all of them.
At
All
Seattle on November 13th is looking like a loss to me, but we'll see. That's next week. That doesn't count for this.
I can't handle another loss to Seattle. Dang it! So let's not and say we did. I'm over losing to Seattle. I'm really over it. So yeah, I think the Blues is the right pick. Saturday night at Ball Arena again against the Blues, who you were proven to beat with your backup and have a pretty solid night offensively. I mean, I know it was a lot to do with the power play that night, but nonetheless, you took care of business against the St. Louis Blues. Okay, hold on. I love this. We're getting bold predictions from our commenters. We got a bold prediction.
Wow.
Sage Walker. He says Pavel Shorty.
Wow. That might be more bold than mine, honestly.
Honestly, that's the only
Wow.
way he'll score.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't see him scoring many other ways unless he's on the shorthanded, or on one of his 45-second or 30-second shifts on the fourth line. I don't know how lucky he gets there, but Tufty gets tucked into the top line. What do you think of that, Jack?
Into the lineup.
Okay.
Lineup.
I misread that.
Because that was my prediction,
that was yours.
I think.
Yeah, I think he was just making a funny prediction there.
I didn't get to say my piece on Pavel.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I just don't like that he was on the fourth line for the Eagles, and I know that the logic follows like, hey, they wanted to be a fourth liner, but it doesn't work that way. In the AHL, you have to perform, you have to be playing well. That's always the story, right? And the fourth line, they don't play a lot in the AHL. There's a lot of special teams time, and he is on the penalty kill, so it's not like he's like benched, but he's been real rough with the puck. I don't love the double standard, because a guy like Bowers was a good fourth liner. Bednar liked it in his camp. And the story was, well, you didn't produce in the AHL, you're never getting called up. Yeah. And Pavel, it doesn't matter. He was on he was on the short list. White and Myers was out. Holland was out. Why couldn't he be in the top six, playing center, getting ready for a call up, getting more minutes, blah, 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 and nothing. So the fit is very interesting. How could somebody that really hasn't been playing that well, I'm not going to say he was playing bad, but not playing well in the AHL, get inserted in the NHL, and we'll see what he's able to
Yeah, it's a
accomplish.
great point, because it's like if you think of the AHL roster and the forward groups as like sometimes I like to think of them in terms of like 1 through 24. You would think that whoever slots into that top 12 is somebody not from the bottom 12 of the AHL squad too. You know what I'm saying? So like if it were just like a totem pole of forwards and how they fit into the Avalanche, I don't think that Pavel, based on his role in Loveland, like is somebody in the middle of that, which is kind of what we should be looking towards. I think, like you mentioned, he's probably more towards the bottom. Even in Loveland, he gets less ice time. So Ezra, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think?
I guess it's just like who from the Eagles makes sense to come up and play a couple of minutes, win some faceoffs, kill some penalties. You know, I don't think there are other great options with the Eagles right now. There are other guys who deserve more ice time more than Pavel, I think, based on his play. I think that's fair to say. But are there other guys who really belong in that role? I don't know. They probably have like a pecking order for certain jobs.
Gotcha.
These are the guys that we want. When this guy when this type of role comes available, these are the guys we want. When this type of role comes available, and I could see it not being the top of that. I understand what you're saying, Jackie, about the merit double standard. I get that, but maybe in this role, they're looking at the merit being like, okay, who's playing the most defensively sound, who's winning draws, who's killing penalties. I don't know. I haven't watched enough Eagles to speak to that, but to me, it's like, okay, they want this guy for this job. Let's see if he can win this job, because he didn't get the chance to do that in preseason with an injury.
That's true.
You know, if they begin to operate like that, I think I'd believe it more, but it just never worked like that before. Like they have Kivi Ranta, who's not even on an NHL contract, on the top line, and he's not a scorer even in the AHL. He's a defensive guy. Yeah. He's on the top 6. So
I don't love that at all.
It just but yes, you're right. A lot of their top forwards aren't on NHL contracts. Actually, the second highest scorer on an NHL contract that's a forward on the Eagles is Lawson.
Yeah. Which we haven't talked about.
2 points that both came in last night.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So you have Tufte, and then the next NHL contracted forward is Lawson. So yes, I agree with the point that like pickings are slim, but just the way that they have it set up, it doesn't work that way. And we'll see. We'll see if Pavel's a good NHL player, good for him. But I don't like the double standards, and they just make up excuses as they go. So we'll see.
I also realized from this conversation, I've heard the name Ben Myers for the first time since August and forgot that he existed.
Well, he has a minor injury. You know, that's true. It could have been him, but he has a minor injury. So I guess
that makes more sense then.
If he hadn't have been hurt, you know, would he have been the guy and not Pavel? So
Definitely.
I think that's a fair point.
Without a doubt in my mind.
That's a great point.
So yeah, there's not too many choices, I guess. So if they all equally get an opportunity throughout the course of the year, then I have less of a problem with it. But that has to come to fruition.
Yeah, and I need to see the people that like we're all dying to see and how they perform at the next level, like actually get a shot at it for a change. And I think, Jackie, that's really what you're speaking to, is the frustration surrounding that. Like we've seen them move and turn the page on guys so quickly that felt like, wow, they just need like 10 games. Just give them 10 games to find out. Or we've seen them move on from them via trades and stuff like that. And you know,
well, we've just heard so much. You have to be playing well in the AHL.
Yeah.
You have to be producing. You have to be an impact player, like over and over and over and over and over again. Like Bednar and everybody, it's the company line, McFarland, anybody you talk to. You know, they say these things are so important. And so then you buy into it. Okay, you know, these guys have never impressed. They've never really scored that much. But here it doesn't matter. And like I said, okay, if they really liked Pavel, when there was an injury to Myers, an injury to Peter Holland, why wasn't he in the top 6 getting ready for this?
Yep.
And so that's where I'm at with this. So, But good luck to Pavel tonight. It's cool he gets to have his NHL debut. But, I'm going to call them out on this stuff because I'm the one paying attention.
yeah, exactly.
And I'm not letting it go until there's accountability.
Yeah. Well, I hear you on that.
Sorry for all of you who are tired about hearing about it, but I'm tired of being disappointed.
You know what? I'd like to think that, and I'd just like to take a quick moment and thank one Peter McNabb for all that he did for us Colorado Avalanche fans. And today marks the 1-year anniversary of his passing. So here's cheers to Maxie. But I think he's one of the people who might agree with you, Jackie, and say, like, because he was always big on the young guys, I felt like, especially the ones that seem to be putting in the work otherwise. So I think you're not alone in thinking that, the story for a lot of these young projects has kind of been flawed by maybe some short-sighted thinking. So, and then the other thing I wanted to touch on before we move on is the Pierre Lacroix celebration of his entering into the Hall of Fame, I believe.
Yep.
And they're doing an alumni game. So we actually saw Joe Sakic and Peter Forsberg and a slew of other Avalanche alumni back on the ice. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Get him on PTOs. Let's go.
Yeah.
We need some help.
Man, I'll tell you what. I think Sakic could probably still shoot. So if we get the other teams to agree just to not touch him and let him stand at the dot like Ovechkin and just let him do fake shots and snap that wrister, yeah, who knows? Maybe he can get us going 5-on-5.
all the young kids would be in awe, so they would just let him go. I
thought it was cool that like all of the young players like came out because some of the Avs alumni used the Family Sports Center as their practice facility heading into this alumni game, which is against the Rangers of all teams. So, but they were all kind of out there videotaping Peter Forsberg doing his thing. And I was like, see, they're just like us. They get it. They have heroes too.
I can't believe they just didn't use Ball Arena. I can't believe all those legends got on the ice at Family Sports. I can't believe it.
To be fair, yesterday there was a Nuggets game at Ball Arena.
Well, I mean, they could have done it this morning. They could have done it at morning skate this morning. Like, to me, that's just hilarious. I mean, and I know that they had just replaced the boards and the ice. Maybe they're trying to be less embarrassing, knowing that these guys were coming.
Maybe they showed them the plans that Kroenke won't share with us for the next facility that's supposed to be where Ilitch's is, or right?
Mm-hmm. I think the new idea is they want to like take the whole block, including like that big parking lot at Ball Arena, because it's kind of a waste. Like you could make parking garages and you could develop all of that. And I think that's the latest thought, but will it ever happen? We'll see.
Well, I hope it happens, and if it does happen, Colorado Avalanche fans, we will be here to talk about it, and we will be here to share that news with you. So thank you all very much for tuning in today. On behalf of the Mile High Hockey Lab, my name is Adrian Hernandez. Be sure to head on over to our website, milehighhockey.com, and head on over to Spotify. We got a new catalog over there. Each episode that we broadcast live is available the next day in its recorded form. And it's kind of fun to listen back because when we do our bold predictions, especially when they are surrounding a game like tonight's game, you can go back and say, oh, look how stupid you were just 10 hours ago. So please go like, subscribe, and share that content with your fellow Avalanche fans. And signing off here from Pueblo, Colorado, just south of the home of the Colorado Avalanche. We love you. Go Avs.
Welcome to
Mile High Hockey Lab.
Mile High Hockey Lab.
It's called